With the new Classic Fresh about to launch and Blizzard recently removing the buff and debuff limit, which is kind of a limiting factor in Classic World of Warcraft that doesn't even allow you to play your class. It doesn't allow you to press the buttons you would do to do more damage because they would push the other buffs that are more important off of your character or off of the boss. Anyways, a lot of people are curious how this actually changes the meta, how this will affect what classes are performing well in the raids, and if you can finally play that specific other class. Like a Resto Druid can now actually use their heals instead of just being there for Fairy Fire. So today we're going to do a quick-ish tier list going over all of the classes and how they will actually perform, starting with healers and tanks. I do want to just notify you all, it doesn't matter what the meta is. Please just play whatever you like in Classic WoW. That's the only thing that matters. Enjoy the game for yourself, although it will inevitably probably be pretty hard to get invited to raids. As we kind of move forward after the first month of raiding, it will kind of hone down. It's just kind of the way that players are. They always end up inviting more of the meta classes, which is very frustrating. It's the antithesis of fun, but it's just what happens. So either way, let's dive right in. There's very few classes that actually make it into the S tier, the best classes. Holy Paladin is the best healer on Alliance side. It's the best healer in the game, no matter what. At the same time, on the opposite side, for Horde, they have Resto Shaman, where is it? Also completely S tier. You need a Shaman in every melee group because Shaman's Wind Fury Totem it's only party wide. So you pretty much have a Shaman in every group, and Shamans pretty much just cast Chain Heal. You drop totems and cast Chain Heal. But it's amazing. They are the other strongest healer. Technically, they might even be a better healer. The only issue is they're very mana intensive. So you're gonna need to chain chug green mana pots because you'll run very fast. So what you do is you do Flask of Distilled Wisdom. You can keep popping these flasks, which will only cost like 40 gold each. Good thing there's no gold buyers because there's no GKP, right? You can keep popping these and it will instantly give you 2,000 mana. You keep popping these. That is actually something that Resto Shamans have to do. Holy Paladins don't have to worry about it. Those are the S tier healers. And the S tier tank, there's only one S tier tank, and that is a Fury Warrior. Fury Warrior is the only S tier tank. Prot Warrior is probably B tier. Fury Warrior is the only S tier tank that there will be in the game. Every now and then you'll throw on a shield, but you're Fury Prot. For the sake of this tier list right now, let's just do tanks and healers really fast, and then I'll do all DPS. So first of all, Fury will be S. Prot Warrior is B tier. Prot Paladin is D tier. You have literally no taunt. You have very little threat. You are almost out of mana at all times. You're auto attacking the whole time. Only time a Prot Paladin is good is when boosting people or in like a dungeon like Stratholme where everything is undead. So you can do some like an undead AoE. But like what Prot Paladin really excels at is pulling a lot of enemies, slowly building threat on them, blocking a lot of the damage incoming, and basically having a Thorns build where you're doing some damage back every time you get hit. Holy Priest, A tier, maybe B tier, but kind of A tier. You can now use like Renew, but you wouldn't really use it anyways. It's not really a powerful heal, and it potentially might be like mana intensive. I'm not actually 100% sure. What's gonna happen is the way that Holy Priest is absolutely S tier, I'm counting Holy and Disc at the same time, by the way, is if you're on Alliance. That's because you have to play a Dwarf Priest, because Dwarf Priests are the only ones that get Fear Ward. Absolutely S tier on Alliance. A, maybe top of B on Horde. Feral Tank, A tier. This is your next best tank. You maybe bring a Feral Tank who swaps to Feral DPS, but other than that, you just run Fury Prot tanks. I mean, realistically, you have no need to bring a Feral Tank. Technically, you could put it in top of B tier, but it's the only other viable tank. Okay, so let's put it in A tier. All right, and those are your tank options. Those are your tank options. Technically, while leveling, you can have like an enhanced tank, but that's it, right? Warrior is the only good tank. Feral Druid is a decent alternative if they're using Manual Crowd Pummeler on repeat, which for people that don't know, Manual Crowd Pummeler, they literally need to go into Gnomergan, farm this one boss at the very end of the instance, hope that he drops this item that has 3 uses each time, that you have to use is the only way you have any decent threat, because it increases your attack speed by 50%. Every feral druid will farm 5 of these in between. They'll spend like 2 to 5 hours farming 5 of these in between every raid, every week. Have fun, by the way. Okay. All right. Is there any other healer? I mean, Shadow Priests are oh, Resto Druid. Does Resto Druid get better because they can now actually press their heals? Does Resto Druid get better? Kind of. The thing is, Resto Druids don't have any AoE heals, so they do have HOTS, can be kind of mana intensive, but at least they're a lot, they definitely get a lot better. Resto Druids beforehand were like down here. They're better than a prop paladin, but you brought them only for one reason alone. They pressed an ability called Fairy Fire, which puts a debuff on the target that reduces their armor. You're only bringing Resto Druids for that. Resto Druids have rejuvenation and regrowth. They're 2 main heals. They can't even press those because they put a buff on the character that heals them over time, which will push off your other buffs with the buff limit. That's gone. Now you can do it. So Resto Druid definitely bumps up to like C tier. They get better, not great, not nearly as good as like an Alliance Holy Priest, not nearly as good as a Paladin or Resto Shaman, but like you are viable. You will instantly get all of your tier gear. Yeah, if you play a druid, you get all of your gear, by the way. Yeah, a druid, because there's only 1 druid or 2 druids per raid, you get all of it. Yeah, this is what your healing and tanking tier list pretty much looks like. Now let's restart this and let's see what DPS looks like. Frost Mage. Technically, you're playing Arcane Mage, pressing Frostbolt the entire time. That is technically what you're doing. But your only button is Frostbolt, and that Mage goes into B tier. At the end of the entire expansion, once you're in Nax Ramus, Fire Mage goes into A tier. Till then, Fire Mage C tier. And that's only if you have other good Fire Mages, by the way. Let's go down Frost itself, like full Frost. You're not actually playing it. That's a PvP spec, but at least you can play it. Retribution Paladins. Retribution Paladins have 1 button, and it's called Auto Attack. D tier. You're going to sit there and auto attack. Sure, you're gonna be like seal twisting for your damage, but like you're seal twisting to do an auto attack simulator. Assassination Rogue is down here in the C tier next to Fire Mage. You're higher than Fire Mage. Maybe you're even higher than Arcane Mage, to be brutally honest. Assassination Rogue, you could be higher than Arcane Mage, but there's no reason whatsoever not to play a Combat Rogue. Sorry, A tier. There's no reason whatsoever to not play a Combat Rogue. Assassination Rogue, you can go like Seal Fate Rogue once you get tier 0.5 or tier 2.5, which is only in AQ. So like, and even then you're losing DPS, but fine, it's easy if you're the improved exposed armor. Assassination is not even the PvP spec. That's Subtlety, which is down here. Technically, technically Subtlety is probably here above Fire Mage early on, but Subtlety is down here. It's a PvP spec. But you can also run sub if you're the, for lack of a better word, Cuck Rogue, which is Hemo, also exposed armor. Your Hemo exposed armor. If you're playing a rogue and you're the only rogue in the raid and you don't have improved exposed armor, I feel bad for your raid, but also improved exposed armor is not fun to do. Someone's got to be that person. Shadow Priests can now press their buttons, boys. Shadow Priests are allowed to dot the boss. Shadow Priests are an actual spec now. Is Shadow Priest viable? Shadow Priests can now actually press all of their abilities to do 300 DPS. C tier, maybe top of D tier. In reality, you could have a Shadow Weaving Healing Priest. That's what you're gonna do. Shadow Priest, unfortunately, you might be invited. One Shadow Priest might be invited to the raid early on in like phase 1 until people realize that you're just gonna want a Shadow Weaving Healing Priest. But early on, you'll be invited to the raid until people start gatekeeping. I need to stress this. I'm sorry, but World of Warcraft Classic players, WoW players in general, gatekeep so hard, and they will only bring the meta classes, and it will, if you want to play an off meta spec, it will ruin your fun. Try to find a very chill dad guild that will invite you and allow you to play your random spec. You're gonna have like 2 raid nights, but there's a lot of gatekeepers. So you're probably, Shadow Priest can stack a debuff. You're probably gonna have a priest that heals and stacks that debuff. Okay. Feral Druid DPS. Okay, so in phase 1, in phase one, Feral Druid DPS is actually kind of like A tier. I mean, it's like, it's around. You're there. You're kind of there. A good Feral Druid, especially now that you can use your dots, you're actually having a good time. You will fall off pretty hard, and that's like before people really get world buffs. You'll be fine in the first couple raids. You'll do actually really well in the first couple raids, and then fall off pretty hard. Where you really realistically are going to be, maybe the top of C, maybe the bottom of B. But you're actually like useful, but there's no reason to bring them over bringing warriors other than to have a raid wide or a party wide buff for the warriors. And your Feral Druid ideally is the, if you have a feral tank, they're going to DPS every now and then, right? Ellie Shaman early on can do some damage, then it falls down to sitting here with everybody else as well. You're just going to bring resto shamans. The change of buff and debuff limit doesn't do anything for Ellie Shaman. Like, sure, maybe it allows you to use Flame Shock. Why do we want to play Arcane Spec for Mage? Because Frost Spec does nothing for you, actually. All of the things that give you more DPS are pretty much coming from Arcane Spec. You have one Frost Spec Winter's Chill Mage, but you're only pressing Frostbolt. You don't need any meta classes to kill things in Classic. Classic bosses are so insanely easy, but people will gatekeep. Enhanced Shamans, do they get better? Are they viable? Unfortunately, your Enhanced Shaman scales very mediocrely with world buffs. Enhanced Shamans are going to do D tier DPS. If we're looking at like, these are like, it's not like it's bad DPS. It's just like, these are like big gaps usually. These differences. You can bring one with Nightfall. Correct. Exactly. You can get one Nightfall Shaman, which is a debuff that will be put on the bosses that will buff all of your casters 15%. The thing is, do you need to buff your casters? Maybe in a casual raid. And Enhanced Shaman in PvP, Enhanced Shaman runs around and one-shots people. Enhanced Shaman runs around and literally just one-shots everyone. Balanced Druid's DPS. Balanced Druid currently in Season of Discovery has one of the most fun rotations they've ever had, and it's one of the best versions of Balanced Druid ever. In Classic WoW, now that you can actually use things like Moonfire, you can use Moonfire and you can use like whatever swarm, bug swarm thing. Balanced Druid can actually do some more DPS. Putting it here in D tier. Insect Swarm, there we go. Putting it down here in D tier. Congratulations, you went from the back of D tier to right here in D tier. I mean, Rhett can go right here too, who cares? But at least you can press your buttons. You just still won't do damage. It's all of these things that you're now allowed to press are adding, for all of the classes, are adding like 20 to 40 DPS for you. The thing is, you're still doing 360 DPS now, while warriors are still doing 800, 600 to 800. You know, Fury Warrior is the only S tier DPS in all of Classic World of Warcraft. Combat Rogue can touch it at times, especially early on. During the first raid, your Rogue actually should win. Your Rogue and your Hunter actually should win, not Survival. Get the fuck out of here. Whatever. Maybe, whatever. I'm just counting Hunter in general, okay? On the very, very first raid, before you get world buffs, your Rogue, your Warlock, your Hunter are actually pumping on damage, and your Mage are actually pumping on damage. The second you get world buffs, no one is there anymore. It's all warrior. A good rogue can keep up, but can keep up. A good rogue will beat 99% of warriors, but every good warrior will dumpster every rogue. And removing the debuff and buff cap only makes warriors even better. But a good rogue will beat almost every warrior. A good rogue will beat almost every warrior. So I'm putting rogue now into the S tier for that reason. A good rogue will beat almost every warrior. A good warrior will never be beat by a good rogue. Maybe I should say great for both of those. A great warrior will never be beat by a great rogue. A great rogue will destroy even good warriors. Arms warrior, I mean, technically, I mean, you can go BRE arms warrior and be in the A tier. So you could even be in the S tier. I'm putting you in the A tier. If you get BRE from your first raid, it's the two-handed sword. I mean, that thing is insane off Ragnaros. It's insane. Okay. Affliction Warlocks. Now Affliction Warlocks can finally use their dots. The debuff limit is been lifted. The debuff limit has been lifted. You can now use your dots. Curse of Agony. corruption, immolation. You can dot the boss and it won't push off all of the other buffs or debuffs on the boss. Luckily, this pushes you up to the top of D tier. I mean, maybe it can put you in C tier. Just wait till you get Bloodvine is like the biggest copium thing. I don't know if anyone has the clip, but not like your debuffs, not like your dots are actually doing damage for you, right? It's not like you're actually doing more damage, but one warlock needs to Curse of Wreck so that these guys can do damage. If you are the only warlock in your raid and you are pressing Curse of Agony, which is the dot that does damage for you, increasing your DPS by like 12 DPS instead of giving everybody 5 to 7% more damage by pressing Curse of Recklessness, killing a boss 30 seconds faster because you decided to give yourself 12 DPS, which in the long term is actually lowering your damage because of the longer fight. You are such a griefer, and most warlocks are going to do that. Curse of Recklessness is still your most important button. Then you have the other curses. Now there's multiple curses. Curse of Elements doesn't do everything for you. You also need Curse of Shadows. So multiple warlocks will be doing curses that aren't the damage ones. You're pretty much mostly doing your damage from Shadow Bolt anyways. Let's count all warlocks in the same place basically. Hunter, I'm just gonna choose one hunter spec. Hunters will start out the raid at the very first phase. You are in the S tier. At the very first phase, you're in S tier. In the BWL phase, you are kind of in A tier, maybe like top of B tier, and then you kind of fall to like top of C tier or bottom of B tier as the game goes on. In BWL, it's because there's a weapon off of the final boss that will never drop for you, but it is amazing, called Azrathal. It is huge. And then you can go out into open world PvP, and people are going to have to remember that hunters can two-shot anyone in open world PvP, by the way. People forget that hunters will crit you twice and you are instantly dead. If a hunter sees you first as you're a rogue, you're dead. A hunter will actually kill you in melee range. If you are a rogue 1v1ing a hunter in melee and you don't stun them and you don't use evasion, you will actually lose the 1v1. It's something that a ton of people complained about in Season of Discovery, but it's the same thing in Classic. You will lose the 1v1. They will do more damage to you in melee than you will do. And I'm counting all hunter specs here. If you want to have fun as a hunter, you're going to want a melee weave. It's super easy to do, but it will give you a good, I don't know, like 60 DPS. Either way, hunter's going to start out actually pretty solid. Hunters are going to actually start out pretty solid. But for the most part, even with the buffs, debuff changes, even if you can Serpent Sting, the only things that have really changed are Shadow Priests are now actually usable. Balanced Druids are not actually really usable. I mean, sure, you can be balanced for the buff for your group, but balance, what you're going to do, what you'll see is like a balanced Resto Druid, which isn't actually doing anything other than like using Fairy Fire and buffing. Realistically, you're going to be like healing, to be brutally honest, or you're there to buff a group so that they can parse. Same thing with the Shadow Priest. You're there to debuff the boss so that a group can parse. Affliction Warlocks, sure, you got like 40 DPS. It didn't actually change where you land at all. Hunters, now you can use Serpent Sting. If Serpent Sting is going to scale with spell power, that's a different story potentially, which means you're going to need to ninja all of the loot from everybody. Use Serpent Sting. I mean, there's some fun things that could come. There's some fun things that could come from this, but that's everything. This is what it's going to look like. Realistically, you're going to have raids that are going to be like 18 out of your 40-man raid is going to be like 18 Fury Warriors, 4 rogues. And that's like on average because of Classic players love to gatekeep. They love to follow the meta. And as unfun as that is, fighting for loot for everyone, you won't be able to like go to a different raid and just GDKP buy it or anything. Like, you're gonna struggle finding loot. But I highly think Blizzard drops more loot in these raids.